Today we're going to talk about how to get that A star in biology. One of the most important things that you need to think about is the overall framework. So thinking about how you're going to answer the questions in the way that's going to get you the marks. To do that, I use a framework with my students where we think about three things: comprehension, retention, and application. So obviously, you need to understand what each of those terms means. So let me break it down for you. In terms of comprehension in biology, we mean that you need to not only remember, but actually understand what you're talking about. And when you're writing a question, you'll be able to explain clearly and include the keywords that they're looking for to score the marks. So retention, in simple words, just think about it as actually having the ability to remember the content that you're learning. Obviously, if you studied it the day before in the morning, maybe tomorrow you'll remember it. But the key thing that you have to do is actually spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a technique that actually most students will use at some point across all the subjects that they're studying at university, at school, and it's really useful to get to know in the earlier years if possible. What you're doing is actually trying to use methods that work for you, and these could be flashcards, they can be active recall from questions, it could be something like making a mind map and actually going through it. Using that, whatever works for you specifically, to go through the content that's relevant to your subject. So take the example of photosynthesis. You understand what it is. It's a process by which we make glucose in plants. They use chloroplasts, etc. Maybe you've drawn a diagram for yourself. Maybe you've drawn and written out the equation, whether it's in word form or you've written out the chemical formulas. But what can you do with that and how can you remember it? At a certain point, you're going to accumulate a pile of flashcards. Maybe you have the diagrams, maybe you have the equations on them. And the best thing to do is just to use them as you get more and more information on those flashcards and to study multiple topics every day for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Okay, so the last thing you have to do is actually apply all the information. You've studied it, you understood it, you can explain it to someone, you've done the flashcards, the mind maps, whatever you've chosen to do. Now you've got the information in your head and you have to apply it. Obviously, it will depend what kind of question you have, because within each subject, we have different types of questions, and we'll talk about that at some point soon. But the key thing to remember is when you're applying the information to the question, you need to understand what kind of question it is. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but you need to think about whether it's maybe a data application question, or whether it's a question that's asking you to recall a specific definition, or maybe it's a question that's asking you to do multiple steps and you have to think about which one you're going to prioritize first. Regardless, once you know what kind of question it is, then it becomes a lot easier to actually do and give them whatever they're looking for within the specific question within that paper. So as I mentioned earlier, you can have a number of different types of questions that you'll have within the paper. For example, you can have one that's asking you to recall specific knowledge in a definition. Another one could be to do with data extraction. And then a third type could be when you have to do multiple steps at the same time to reach some sort of conclusion. For recall knowledge questions, like when they ask you to name an organelle, you need to make sure that you're not relying on some colloquial concepts that you might get used to using with your friends, or when talking about something like mitochondria, for example, the powerhouse of the cell, but you need to use the term itself. Otherwise, you're not going to get the mark. So for data and graph-related questions, you obviously have to understand what information they're giving you. So take a look at the information itself. You might have a table, you might have a graph. If it's a graph, read the axes. The first thing, obviously, that you should do is try and understand what kind of relationship you're looking at. What are they trying to show you with the numbers, with the bar charts, with anything really that they've included in the graph. But also, remember that in tables, you have a lot of useful information that you shouldn't ignore, and use the tables themselves by looking at the columns, looking at the rows, trying to understand the relationship between the two. Make sure you're not just looking at the numbers, but trying to understand what kind of changes the table is actually trying to show you with the variables that you have in front of you. Oftentimes with these questions, they will ask you about the validity of the results and also to comment on what you're seeing and how much you can essentially trust the information in front of you. Once you've understood the relationship that they're trying to communicate to you through the graphs or through the tables, what you can do is you can assess the accuracy, the reliability, and the reproducibility of the experiment itself. The three terms, accuracy, reproducibility, and reliability, are something that a lot of people get confused on, so don't worry if you don't really understand the difference between the three. let's think about each one as we go along. Accuracy is perhaps the most obvious one because it tells you how close this measured value that you have in front of you is to the true value of this variable. Reliability tells us whether we can trust the results, and it's measured by how consistent they are. I think that's fine. Should we do it the proper way?
I need to elaborate on that.
Okay, cool. Finally, reproducibility is whether the same. Okay. Finally, reproducibility is exactly what it sounds like. It's whether we can have the same results if we follow the same experiment, the same steps, but different people do it. Is that okay? No, I don't like it. Wait.
Same steps.
Wait, let me say it one more time. Whether the same results can be obtained by different people. That sounds way better. Okay. Reproducibility is exactly what it sounds like. It's the measure. No, I think that's the annoying bit. Reproducibility. Reproducibility is a measure of, no. Reproducibility allows us to...
And finally, reproducibility
okay.
is where you can conduct the same experiment again and again and again.
Okay.
With the same results.
Yep. And finally, reproducibility is the measure of... no, I don't like the measure bit. Reproducibility measures whether the same results can be obtained by different people. Okay. And finally, reproducibility. What did I say? And measures.
Reproducibility is when you can measure?
No, it is a measure of whether the same... Reproducibility measures whether the same... is a measure of whether the same results can be obtained by different people. Reproducibility is a measure. Yeah, that makes sense because it's like a literal thingamabob.
Yeah. So you're measuring the experiment itself from its quality, right?
Yeah, okay. Let's try. Whether the same results can be obtained by different people. Okay. And finally, reproducibility, a measure of whether we can obtain the same results if we use the same steps of the experiment, but if it's done by different people. When using these key terms, don't forget to draw on the data from the graphs or tables. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe, share it with a friend, and don't forget to ask any questions through a comment below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. At Spires, world-class tutors are just one click away, and we can instantly match you with academics from Oxbridge, the Russell Group, and Ivy League universities. Tutors are available in 20 countries and in countless subjects. So take care, and we wish you the best of luck in your studies.